back to my channel. Today I'm going to be teaching you how to paint a cup of hot cocoa using your watercolors. So I already have my Winsor & Newton beginner set of watercolor paints all set up. I'm going to be using a lot of the colors like straight out of the pan, so there's not going to be a lot of mixing in this episode. And then I have my Princeton snap brushes. I already have sketched out my hot cup of cocoa on my watercolor paper. What I did was I sketched it out on a separate sheet of paper. I scribbled pencil, charcoal all over the back, and then I just traced that picture straight onto my watercolor paper to give me a rough outline for our painting, to give me some guidelines. I am going to erase my lines a little bit more, but I wanted to leave it like this so you could see what I'm starting out with to begin with. All right, so let's grab our water, our paintbrush, and let's get started. We are going to start with the cup part of our hot cocoa. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my size 6 brush, fill it up with water to activate my red paint. And my goal for this is to make it as loose as possible. The more I paint with watercolor, the more I realize I love how loose watercolors look. So I'm going to start with a very light wash of red. And I'm just going to fill in that cup area. And I want this to be nice and wet. I made sure that my brush had a ton of water on it and I just dabbed off any extra so it didn't pool. But if it's nice and wet, it's going to really allow me to have time to play with my colors, to add some shadowing, and then it also gives a fun blooming effect that I love. All right, so now I'm going to go in with a darker red. So this is more paint than water to get a darker red mixture. And then I'm going to just start tapping that in. I do want it to be a little bit darker on the left side than on the right. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take a little bit of paint off my brush, and then I'm just going to pull over pigment over here so it doesn't have too much color on this side. Take a little bit more paint on my brush. I'm just going to dab it in over here. Really make it dark along the rim. And down here, I want it to be nice and dark. Just a little bit right there. And then I'm going to take some pigment off and blend out the darker tones that I brought in on this side. All right, and I'm gonna let this dry and then we'll move on. So usually what I do when I let my watercolors dry, I use a heating tool. I will have that linked over on my blog. The link will be in the description box below. I absolutely love using a heating gun. I used to not, I just let it air dry for the longest time, and using a heating gun I think just speeds up the process so much. I absolutely love it. So if you're interested in that, head over to my blog to check out that recommendation I have over there. All right, so we're gonna go back in with a second layer over our cup, and I just noticed I totally forgot to do the handle in my first step. So we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna do the handle, then we're going to go do our second layer. So what we're going to start with, I'm actually going to pre-wet my handle real quick. So to give this a natural shadow, I'm going to just fill it up like we did before with that light red paint. I want the very tip to be a shadow because that's where the light would hit it the most. And I'm going to dab in my darker tone and down here. Just like that. Then I'm going to take a dry brush. I'm just going to kind of pick up some paint, make it a little curved. Now while that's drying, I'm going to get a thicker tone of paint, and I'm going to go back in on my cup and just give it a second layer. Whenever I paint with this color, I always like it best when I go back in with another coat. You want your rim to be pretty much straight across because our whipped cream isn't going to come down over the cup. We're going to have the hot cocoa and then whipped cream on top. So you want the rim to be pretty straight like it would be naturally because your hot cocoa isn't going to mess up the way your cup looks. Okay, then I'm doing what I did before, just taking some paint off my brush by cleaning it off my brush a little bit, and then I'm spreading it out over here. And then I'm going to go back in on my handle. I'm going to add a little bit darker paint around the tip. And then I'm going to rinse off my brush. And I'm going to blend it into that center because again, that's my highlight area and I want to keep that pretty light. Just blend that right there. There you go. All right, we want this layer to completely dry before we move on to our hot cocoa and whipped cream. Now we're going to start with our whipped cream. I'm going to fill up the entire area that I have lightly sketched out with water. And then I'm going to go in with a very light wash of gray, which I'm using Payne's Gray, mixed very, very lightly. I'm just going to add some detail lines, kind of where I want my whipped cream to be. You want the gray to appear to be white. All right, and then with my lines, just gonna rinse my brush off a little bit, and then I'm gonna blend out so nothing's harsh. Try to make the lines that you do add a little bit more curved, just to give that natural look that whipped cream does have. All right, and then we're gonna leave it like that. We can always adjust it a little bit. It's going to look a lot more pronounced when we add the hot cocoa color underneath. So again, let this layer dry before you move on to the hot cocoa section. Now we're gonna paint in our hot cocoa. I've already mixed together a color of brown using Payne's Gray and Burnt Sienna. I will have all of these colors that I use listed over on my blog, so just click the link in the description box below to head over there to get any extra details you'd like on this tutorial. Alright, so what I'm going to do, I want it to be a pretty thick mixture for the most part. I do want to end up adding darker tones later. So what we're going to do is I'm going to fill in, I'm using a smaller brush for this. I'm just going to fill in underneath the whipped cream. Kind of following the curves that you made. Get a little bit more paint on my brush. Just kind of re-wetting so it all dries evenly. I'm going to wrap it around. And I'm going to take a little bit of Payne's Gray and add that to my dark mixture. And I'm going to tap it in just along where the whipped cream is. Trying to give that just a little bit of a hint of a shadow. Then a little along this rim. Just like that. Alright, and then since the next step is not even going to touch where we just painted, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make a navy blue color using ultramarine blue and Payne's Gray. And this is going to be the color of our plate underneath. And you don't have to worry if your color doesn't look exactly like mine. You might already have a navy blue color, so you don't even need to mix. Alright, so I'm going to do, I already drew out this circle for my plate. And I'm just going to fill this in. And then once it's all wet, I'm going to add some darker shadows. And I'm still using that smaller brush. It all depends too on how big your sketch is. Mine is smaller just so it fits in screen. Alright, and then I'm going to add just a little bit more Payne's Gray to my navy blue mixture. And then I'm just going to tap that in. Circular motion underneath the cup, closest to the cup. Again, to create a shadow. And then I'm going to get a little bit more water on my brush and just kind of blend that out. And then I'm going to take a dry brush. I'm just going to kind of pick up some paint along the bottom rim. Just like that. Just to give it some depth. I don't want it to look too flat. And then I'm just going to keep going while this is wet. All right, with this step, I'm going to be a little bit careful and I'm not going to touch my plate. Just going to add some clean water around it without touching it. I'm just going to add the lightest layer of Payne's Gray, just to give it the depth, the look that it's actually on a surface, not just floating. A little bit darker right there. And then I'm going to take some more clean water. I'm just going to blend it in down here and around the sides. I'm going to leave it just like that. And then I'm going to let this completely dry, and then we're going to add 2 layers of splatter to this painting. I hope you all enjoyed painting with me today and that you learned something new. If you'd like any extra details on this painting or on the supplies that I used or the paint colors that I used, head to my blog reflectingcreation.com. I'll have a link in the description box below. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel and give this video a thumbs up. I'd appreciate to see you back on this channel, and I hope that we can continue learning watercolor together. All right, have a great day. Bye.